What does it mean to hold thunder in your hands? To stand in the storm and yet remain unshaken? This is the power of Shango, the Orisha of fire, lightning, dance, and justice. A deity who teaches us not only strength, but also balance. Sango, or Shango, is recognized as one of the most prominent and powerful deities within the Yoruba pantheon of Orishas, a figure whose influence spans West Africa and the global African diaspora. His name appears in various transliterations depending on the region and linguistic heritage of the traditions. Sango in traditional Yorubaland, Nigeria, Shango in the Cuban Regla de Ocha, Santería or Lucumi, and Shango in Brazilian Candomblé. This pervasive presence underscores his centrality in Afro-diasporic cosmology. An Orisha embodies a dual identity, that of a deified ancestor and that of a natural force. Shango precisely personifies this duality, being revered both as a historical king and as the immediate embodiment of elemental power, specifically fire and lightning. His influence is not limited to the Yoruba. He is also integrated into the religion of the Edo people, who call him a Sango, and the Fon people of Benin, where he is known as Sogbo or Ebioso. In this episode, we'll explore the primary theological and ethno-historical understandings of Shango across three major traditions: Isese Lagba, traditional Yoruba practices; Regla de Ocha, Lucumi, Cuba; and Candomblé Ketu, Brazil. The analysis acknowledges that flexibility and regional variations are the norm in Orisha characteristics. Due to these geographic and cultural adaptations, a single Orisha may split into separate aspects or merge attributes with regional variants, a concept known in the diaspora as caminos, paths. The mythological narratives are not treated merely as historical accounts, but as Iving teachings passed down to followers for moral instruction, spiritual guidance, and inspiration toward humility, courage, and transformation. The biography of Shango, moving from mortal king to immortal Orisha, serves as a profound theological narrative concerning the spiritualization of absolute power. Shango's journey represents the transformation of a charismatic, intense, and potentially ruthless political authority into a controlled, divinely mandated force of swift justice. His ultimate ascension hinges upon the spiritual principle that even spectacular human failure can be consecrated into divine power, provided the resultant destruction is channeled toward divine retribution and justice. Shango's origin story is firmly rooted in the history of the Oyo Empire in Yorubaland, where he is widely acknowledged as having reigned as a mighty king, variously cited as the third, or more commonly, the fourth Alayafin of Yo. Oral tradition consistently describes him as a powerful monarch with a strong will and a voice capable of sounding like thunder, a king known to spew fire from his mouth when enraged. To contextualize Shango's temporal sovereignty, scholars have drawn comparisons between his absolute rule and other historical autocrats. Similar to Tsar Ivan the IV, the Terrible of Russia, whose reign established a tradition of ruthless absolute rule, Shango's kingship was marked by centralized power and an inclination toward brutality. The historical comparison illuminates the political archetype Shango represents: a centralized, expansionist ruler whose sardonic and bloodthirsty character provided foundational territorial gains and authority. This analysis suggests that Shango's power, while charismatic, was inherently volatile and lacked social anchors, making him susceptible to internal betrayal later in his reign. Despite the turbulent circumstances of his departure, Shango's reign was foundational. Following his transformation, his cult eventually became integral to the installation of subsequent Oyo kings, cementing his permanent place within the political and religious scaffolding of the empire. Shango's personality embodies the archetype of the charismatic and passionate leader. He is depicted as a born leader, a strategist, and a figure of intense energy. However, his reign was plagued by the need to manage internal threats, necessitating decisive and often ruthless action. The political tensions are crystallized in the conflict between Shango and two powerful ministers, Gbanka and Timi. Seeking to eliminate these rivals, Shango twice pitted Gbanka against Timi in combat. Even after Gbanka was victorious both times, Shango ordered him to be burned to ashes. The critical point of failure in Shango's mortal sovereignty occurred when the powerful Gbanka miraculously reappeared after 3 days, demanding that Shango abdicate the throne. Overwhelmed by this seemingly unresolvable magical and political challenge, Shango sought his magical thunder instrument, the Edun Ara, from his beloved wife, Oya. The instrument was found wet and stained with blood from Oya's menstruation, rendering it ineffective until refortified. This confluence of political defeat, loss of magical efficacy, and personal crisis compounded by the realization that his absolute power was insufficient against a determined spiritual rival, led to his downfall. The legend of Shango's end is defined by a pair of deeply contradictory narratives, a duality which forms the central theological instruction for his followers. The first narrative emphasizes the human cost of unchecked power and emotional volatility. In a fit of anger and pride, Shango unleashed his power recklessly. This action, perhaps the accidental creation of lightning through magic or the reckless use of the Edunara, resulted in a bolt striking his own palace, setting it ablaze. Overcome with guilt and grief for having doomed his kingdom, Shango fled into the wilderness where, in profound remorse, he committed suicide by hanging himself from a tree. This narrative serves as a potent warning about the destructive capacity of internal rage. The second and ultimately consecrating narrative, known as Obakoso, the king did not hang, denies the suicide. Shango's faithful followers argued that he did not perish but rather ascended into the heavens on a chain, transforming into the Orisha of thunder and lightning. This ascension was immediately confirmed by a great storm that ripped through Oyo, killing the challenging ministers and destroying their homes, a demonstration that Shango, now deified, was actively throwing lightning bolts at his traitors. The enduring theological principle embedded in these conflicting accounts is that the faith of the devotees determines the ultimate reality of the sovereign. The coexistence of these two stories teaches that monumental human failure, even self-destruction born of guilt, can be retrospectively consecrated into divine transcendence, provided the resulting cataclysm serves the greater purpose of divine justice by eliminating his antagonists. Furthermore, the fact that only his favorite wife, Oya, remained true to him until the end, leaving Oyo with him, emphasizes that absolute power necessitates an equally loyal and committed internal support system, one that is inseparable from the power itself, as Oya manifests as the strong wind that precedes Shango's thunderstorm. Shango commands the most volatile elemental forces, fire, lightning, and thunder. His identity is inextricably linked to the sudden, unassailable manifestation of truth and divine retribution that arrives like a thunderclap. The natural forces associated with Shango also incorporate the pre-existing Yoruba deity Jakuda, he who throws stones, whose domain represented the wrath of God, reinforcing Shango's function as the instrument of divine punishment. The element of fire in Shango's context is dualistic. While it symbolizes destruction, volatility, and righteous anger, Shango's elemental command is also critical for life affirmation. As the Orisha of storms, his presence is associated with the essential rainfall that follows, which is necessary for the fertility of the earth. This complexity mirrors the historical Yoruba understanding of fire ecology, where fire, even when destructive, is recognized as a necessary force for the rejuvenation of the landscape. Now let's decode one of Shango's most prominent tool of symbolism. Shango's most prominent ritual symbol and iconographic element is the oshe, or okse, the double-headed battle axe. This object represents Shango's authority, wielded as a king wields a scepter. The significance of the double head is theological, embodying the inherent duality of divine justice, the power to create and the power to destroy. It serves as a constant reminder to devotees that judgment is multifaceted and that the application of true power demands careful balance. Often shown emerging from the head of statues representing the Orisha, the oshe visually represents the overwhelming force and authority of Shango. The iconography and ritual apparel of Shango rely heavily on the duality of red and white. Red symbolizes fire, intense passion, power, and vitality, while white represents purity, wisdom, and the necessary cooling temperament that brings divine balance. Devotees and initiated priests, Omo Shango, typically adorn themselves in red cloth, often printed with white squares or cowrie shells. The sacred necklaces, or eleques, los collares, are constructed using alternating red and white beads. This color scheme visually expresses the central ethical tension of Shango's archetype, the requirement to balance powerful, kinetic passion with spiritual clarity and moral responsibility. Shango is the paradigm of the divine masculine energy, strength tempered with wisdom and authority balanced with overwhelming joy. His power is perceived as a kinetic, vibrant force, not static authority, but rather the expressive energy of a storm. The Orisha's archetype is inextricably linked with artistry. He is celebrated not just as a king and warrior, but as a magnificent dancer and a master drummer. This connection between governance, passion, and artistic expression illustrates a core theological principle. The same fire that fuels creative genius and romantic passion also fuels righteous anger. The fundamental question posed by the Shango mythos is not the acquisition of power, but the discovery of the proper rhythm for its expression. However, this potency carries inherent weaknesses. Shango's profile includes a volatile temper that can erupt with destructive force, an impulsive streak that prioritizes dramatic action over strategic planning, and an easily wounded ego. His history demonstrates that a proud ego is susceptible to interpreting constructive criticism or political rivalry as personal attacks, ultimately clouding judgment and damaging relationships. The esoteric teachings derived from Shango's mythology focus intensely on the management and ethical deployment of power. The core lesson insists that power is not self-justifying, it must actively serve justice. True strength, followers are taught, originates not simply from brute force, but from responsibility, wisdom, and joy. Shango's story serves as a profound caution regarding the dangers of unchecked power and the precarious balance between divinity and destruction. The destruction of his own palace by his own hand, driven by anger and pride, highlights a significant moral principle. External challenges, like rivals Gabonka and Timi, may be confronted and overcome, but the true enemy lies within the self, the failure to control one's own impulsive energy and wounded pride. This theological principle is reinforced by Yoruba wisdom concerning the environment. Proverbs related to fire ecology stress the importance of caution and experience, noting, for example, that if a fire is not endowed with mysterious powers, it does not jump rivers. This wisdom suggests that when matters take a sudden, mysterious, or destructive turn, they are driven by unusual forces, reinforcing the need for mature, trained control over spiritual and literal fire. Petitioning Shango requires the devotee to demonstrate strength and commitment. It is not enough to wait passively for divine intervention. Followers must be willing to step outside their comfort zone to meet challenges, reflecting Shango's dynamic and courageous nature. Devotees seek Shango's guidance primarily in matters requiring courage, protection, and justice. He is invoked particularly during legal matters, personal conflicts, and when seeking the inner strength to overcome daunting obstacles. Prayers focus on admiring his strength and knowledge while petitioning his benevolence and protection from external evil influences and intentions. Shango's complex relationships with his three Orisha wives, Oya, Oshun, and Abba, provide essential lessons regarding loyalty, rivalry, and the nature of passion. Oya is consistently portrayed as his favorite and most loyal consort, remaining true to him until the end and leaving Oyo alongside him during his flight. Oya, the goddess of the Niger River, manifests as the fierce wind that precedes the thunderstorm. Her character emphasizes the principle that kinetic power, Shango's thunder, requires an equally potent, loyal, and committed support system, Oya's wind, to be fully expressed. Shango is also associated with fertility and procreation, having fathered twins with Oshun. His reputation as a woman chaser and a god of sexual prowess links his romantic and generative energy directly to his oshe, the same intense kinetic force that drives his elemental command and creative genius. The relationship with Abba, however, often serves as a cautionary tale. A widespread Yoruba myth surviving in the diaspora, Cuba and Brazil, recounts how Abba, seeking to secure Shango's love and attention, cut off her ear at the deceptive suggestion of another goddess, usually Oshun or Oya, and cooked it into a meal for him. Upon discovering the ear in his food, Shango was enraged and abandoned Abba. This narrative underscores Shango's volatile, ego-driven nature, and more importantly, provides a clear esoteric instruction. Acts of desperation, self-mutilation, or deceit, even when driven by devotion, cannot sustain a relationship with the Orisha of justice, who fundamentally rejects what is unnatural or dishonest. The ultimate spiritual discipline for the Omo Shango is self-mastery. They must recognize that their internal fire, while a source of strength and passion, risks manifesting as the volatility and impulsivity that led to the downfall of the historical king. The focus of their devotion is internal transformation, learning how to wield their inner fire with honor, transitioning storms into triumphs, and ensuring their power is always directed toward justice and protection. The worship of Shango became a cornerstone of Santería, also known as Regla de Ocha or Regla Lukumi, a faith that developed in Cuba during the late 19th century through the syncretism of traditional Yoruba religion, Catholicism, and Spiritism. Syncretism initially functioned as a necessary strategy of concealment for enslaved West Africans. By equating their traditional deities, Orisha, with Catholic saints, practitioners could continue their indigenous spiritual practices while appearing to assimilate into Roman Catholic social norms. Shango is famously conflated with Santa Barbara, Saint Barbara. This association is based on two key characteristics: the shared color of red in their iconography, and Santa Barbara's traditional invocation as a protection against thunder. Consequently, December 4th, the feast day of Saint Barbara, became one of the most important festive days for Shango worship in Cuba. This linking of Shango, a figure of imperial sovereignty and divine retribution, with Saint Barbara, a figure of protection and martyrdom, allowed practitioners to maintain the memory of royal power while simultaneously invoking spiritual defense against violence and sudden calamity. In the Lukumi tradition, the concept of caminos, roads or avatars, ensures the adaptability and flexibility of Shango's worship. These avatars, such as Shango Alufina, delineate specific aspects or manifestations of the Orisha, allowing for a decentralized religious structure to accommodate regional and house-specific theological variances. In Portuguese-controlled Brazil, enslaved people utilized a similar strategy to establish Candomblé as a syncretized religion. Zango's veneration is highly prominent, particularly in the city of Recife. Zango is central to the Candomblé Ketu tradition, which is one of several nations within Candomblé, each possessing unique rituals and cultural expressions. The ceremonial structure is marked by the aluja, known in Brazil as the Roda de Zango, a sacred dance dedicated solely to him. This dance speaks of his dominion, deeds, achievements, and consorts. While historical Candomblé involved significant syncretism, some modern Ketu practitioners now emphasize a return to pure Yoruba cosmology, actively rejecting the Catholic correspondences. The transatlantic transmission of the Orisha pantheon required theological adaptation to new geographies. While some Orishas experienced significant shifts, e.g., Yamaya becoming associated primarily with the sea rather than the river, Shango's core domains, thunder, lightning, and fire, remained constant, solidifying his identity across the diaspora. Beyond the purely religious context, the figure of Shango has become a foundational element of cultural and political identity. Literature from the African diaspora, such as that by Afro-Colombian author Manuel Zapata Olivella, utilizes the powerful archetype of Shango in narrative works dedicated to decolonizing the African diaspora, symbolizing resistance, survival, and ancestral resilience. Shango is an Orisha who thrives on vibrant, passionate, and celebratory devotion, demanding offerings that reflect his fiery and joyous spirit. His sacred foods, amala or elubo, often include dishes made from yam, cassava, or cornmeal porridge, frequently served with okra stew. He favors fruits such as red apples, pomegranates, and plantains, alongside spicy dishes and peppers. Ritual offerings, often performed on Wednesdays, Fridays, or Saturdays depending on the specific tradition, include libations of rum and red wine, along with tobacco and cigars. Cigar smoke is sometimes used in a smudging ritual as part of the invocation. Accepted animal sacrifices include the male goat, sheep, and freshwater turtle. These offerings are placed with reverence and joy to create a sacred bridge between the Orisha and the devotee. Music, particularly drumming and dance, is essential to the practice, serving as a primary form of prayer and glorification for Shango. The bata drum is the dedicated ceremonial instrument used in Lukumi and other traditions. Its primary purpose is the glorification of Shango, often referred to as the Great Spirit of Thunder and Lightning. The intense rhythm generated by the drumming, singing, and dancing, such as the Aluja dance, can bring initiated priests and priestesses into an altered state of consciousness, the trance state. In the trance state, the worshipper becomes spiritually possessed and channels the Orisha. This possession allows Shango to communicate directly with the community, providing essential guidance, information, and performing healings. This transformation of chaotic energy, the storm, into controlled rhythmic sound demonstrates the central theological tenet that power must find its appropriate rhythm for expression. Orisha worshipping traditions require complex initiation rituals for membership, providing structured progression and training to manage the immense power and responsibility associated with the deities. The necessity for rigorous training reflects the danger inherent in Shango's most intense energy. The degrees of initiation confer different levels of knowledge and responsibility. Aleo, initiate. The first rite involves the initiation of the necklaces, ileques or los collares, This ritual brings the initiate into a spiritual family and places them under the authority and protection of their godparents, priest or priestess, warriors. Often conferred soon after the necklaces, this initiation grants the protection of the warrior Orishas, Elegua, Ochosi, and Ogun. Crowning, Iyawo, the subsequent, higher-level initiation where the devotee is consecrated to their specific ruling Orisha, Shango, Awo, priesthood. Ordained priests, such as the Babalawo, Ifa priest, Awo Orisha, Orisha priest, serve as mediators between the physical and spiritual realms, performing complex divination and imparting the wisdom of Ifa. All ceremonies and rituals across the tradition begin with paying homage to the ancestors, Egun, reinforcing the importance of lineage and continuity. The rigorous, multi-staged initiation process reflects a deliberate theological strategy to protect the initiate and the community from the inherent volatility of Shango, channeling his intensity through discipline and structured servitude. The Orisha Shango stands as a monumental figure in Yoruba cosmology and the African diaspora, embodying the dynamic tension between absolute power and moral responsibility. His origins as a powerful, yet ultimately self-destructive, Alafin of Oyo establish him as the quintessential model for the spiritual challenges inherent in leadership and charisma. The dual nature of his departure, simultaneously suicide driven by grief and divine ascension confirmed by destructive thunderstorms, ensures that his legacy serves both as a cautionary tale against the dangers of the volatile ego and as a promise of transformation through faith and righteous action. Shango's enduring relevance lies in his role as the moral compass for the ethical management of oshe. Through the symbolic lexicon of the double-headed oshe and the rigorous discipline of devotional practices, followers are instructed that true strength is kinetic, creative, and joyful, yet requires meticulous control. The path of the Omo Shango is one of necessary confrontation, confronting external injustice, and more critically, confronting and mastering the internal pride and temper that caused the downfall of the original king. In the contemporary context, across Lukumi, Candomblé, and traditional Yoruba practices, Shango remains a powerful force called upon for justice and protection, a constant reminder that the storm is mighty, but even it must be respected. Remember this as you continue in your journey of the Orishas. Shango is not just the thunder in the sky. He is the thunder in the soul. His double axe reminds us that true power lies in balance, destruction and creation, strength and compassion, justice and joy. His fire teaches us to burn away what no longer serves us, while his rhythm reminds us to celebrate the dance of life. To walk with Shango is to walk with courage, with integrity and with passion unafraid to shine. His lesson is simple yet eternal. Your inner lightning is a gift, but it is also a responsibility. So I ask you now, how will you wield your fire? Will you let it consume you? Or will you use it to bring light, justice, and transformation to the world? Stand tall, embrace your rhythm, and let your lightning strike with purpose. The storm lives within you, now is the time to awaken it. If you made it this far, thanks for watching, and if this resonated with you, share it with somebody you think might need to hear this, or just drop a comment saying, Maferafun Shango. Until next time, Oshuno Jodu signing out.